This week on the Lady Brain Show from my kitchen, Sharon Danzger, author of Super Productive and founder of Control Chaos. Welcome to the show, Sharon. It's a pleasure to have you here.
Great to be here.
I am very excited to find out how one becomes super productive, the name of Sharon's book. If you could tell us a little bit about what you did before you wrote the book, Super Productive, that would be great.
Sure. After graduating from college, I worked in financial services for about 9 years. And probably one of the best things that happened to me is I got laid off. They moved my office down to Atlanta. And shortly after, I became pregnant and decided to stay home. I have 4 kids who were all born within about 6 years. Whoa. I've always been very productive.
Yeah.
And I really enjoyed the time home with them. I became very involved in a local community center. And when I look back on it, I feel like being home with 4 kids taught me a lot about resiliency and flexibility, which has helped me in my more work-oriented life now. When my youngest started pre-K, it was a full day, and I thought, I'm really a little antsy. It's time to get back to work. So I started my company, Control Chaos, and that was in 2006. And over the years, it's evolved, and now its primary focus is on corporate training and individual coaching, all related to productivity, so people can do more and stress less.
Oh my gosh, I'm just breathing a sigh of relief hearing you say that that's even possible. What makes this topic of producing more and stressing less so relevant now?
So I think there's probably 2 things that come to mind. One is, since the iPhone came out about 10 years ago, now almost everybody is accessible 24/7. Most people have smartphones, and so everyone's feeling stressed, overwhelmed. There's so much going on. It's very hard to disconnect. And I think there's even been some pushback in terms of a focus on mindfulness and meditation and things that really have been around in many religions going back to ancient times. But people are looking for a way to get away from that feeling of stress and overwhelm. Mm-hmm. And I think the other thing is even more current than that, based on this past election. Regardless of somebody's political views, it caught a lot of people by surprise. It wasn't the expected outcome. And now, with all of the changes that our president has promised, people feel that there's a lot of uncertainty, there's a lot of anxiety. And I think that gets in the way of people being productive in the workplace because they're stressed, they're overwhelmed, they don't know, are they going to be sent back home to a different country? Will they be able to stay here? Will they lose their job? So will they have health care? And all of that stress makes it hard to be your most productive.
It does. I find that since the election, I was very involved during the process and engaged, watching more news and checking Twitter. And I have trouble disengaging from that. And yet I find I'm drawn to it and it stresses me out. And I think that's really common for a lot of people. When you talk about going back to sort of ancient practices and religious practices, how does somebody, get centered around that? Like, are you talking about like Buddhist meditation?
That's exactly right. When it comes to something like meditation, so I'm a fairly analytic left brain person. And I've read about meditation for many, many years. It never really appealed to me because I thought, I can't sit still. I've got too many thoughts racing through my head. I'm just not the type of person to meditate. That's for people who are a little more Zen-like. Mm-hmm. It's for the Californians.
Hey.
But then I read a book a few years ago, and in this book, they talk about meditation as a way to train your brain to focus, and that got my interest. So in the book, they say start with 10, 20 minutes a day. I thought 10, 20 minutes is an absolute lifetime, right? So I thought, I like to set myself up for success. I thought, I think I could sit still for 2 minutes. I'm going to try that. And so I started, I committed to doing it every single day for 21 days. And so every single day before I started my day, I did this 2-minute meditation, just focusing on breathing. And it was hard. Even though it was only 2 minutes, it was really hard. Well, thankfully, after about 2.5 years of this, a friend of mine said, you do it with just breathing? She said, there are guided meditation apps. It's so much easier. So I downloaded Insight Timer, which is the app she uses. I've never looked back. And it has also enabled me, because someone's talking you through it, to increase the amount of time. And now I meditate 10 minutes a day.
Nice. And that center, and you start your day like that?
Every single day.
So if any of your kids are at home, you know what that's like in the morning, right? Before school. And it's, Mom, where's my this? I need you for this. do they just understand that this is mom is in her room or wherever you happen to be for your 10 minutes and that's going to get you centered and they benefit from that? Is that the message?
Oh, I think that's true. If I could convince my kids to meditate also, I would. But my kids are, the youngest is 14 now. Okay. So the good news is she doesn't need me to help her get dressed or get her breakfast. With younger kids, if you were able to convince them to meditate for a short time also, it would have huge benefits for them as well. Because we know for kids even, life has become much more stressful. So I think trying to incorporate it. The other thing I did with my kids, I didn't really ever like getting up early. Mm-hmm. So I tried to find strategies for my kids, whether it be that the numbers have to match on a clock, so don't leave your room before they both say 7, or putting yogurts in a drawer that they could reach in the refrigerator, making it easy for them to get something to eat without having to come and wake me up to get something to eat, so that over time they really developed some pretty good just taking care of their some self-care skills, so that the mornings now go more smoothly. And probably the best thing that you can do with kids is have them lay their clothes out the night before.
Yes.
Especially as girls reach that middle school age.
Right. Oh, please. I mean, I've been late to school because I had to change 23 times in, high school or junior high. What led you to write the book, Super Productive?
So, I never really intended to write a book. I have been writing a newsletter or blog post for probably 9 years. And I have this one aunt, and every single time it would go out, within 5 minutes, I'd get an email back saying, when am I going to see this in a book? When are you writing a book? How's your book coming along? And finally, this past spring, I thought, I've read a bunch of books on productivity, and I think I have something to say that I could share with people that could make their life easier. So I'm going to keep a list in my phone, and when I get to 100 productivity tips, I'll write a book. In May, I hit 100 tips. I thought, oh my God, I got to write a book. I hadn't told anybody, but even a promise to myself is still a promise. So over the summer, I just started writing up about 3 of the 100 tips each week. And then I was getting close to the end of the year, and I was about 2/3, 3/4 done. And I thought, it's the end of the year. Let's just finish the book by the end of the year. So that's what I did.
And you got it done, and here it is. And I cannot wait to sink my teeth into it. We're going to take a break, and we will be right back with Sharon Danzger, author of Super Productive. We're back with Sharon Danzger, author of Super Productive. Hello again. So we asked some of our viewers what gets in the way of them being productive. And many of them said email. And I have an example here. Melissa from California, screen addiction. Email mostly is one of her biggest stumbling blocks. Is that super common?
Oh, more than you know.
Yeah.
So very often when I do training programs, I use live polling. And I will ask the group, what gets in the way of you being your most productive? And email is the #1 answer. In fact, it's why I made it the first chapter of my book, because that seems to be what creates so much stress for people. I wanted to get right to the information that can help them the most. The interesting thing about email is if I asked you, I just read an article about 2 weeks ago, and I'm going to ask you, how long do you think it takes for people to open business emails? What period of time?
Wow. I would say people rifle through them pretty quickly. I don't know, 15 minutes to stay updated. I don't know. I check pretty regularly. And I like to go through them and I like to answer them as quickly as I possibly can because I don't want to be unavailable for somebody professionally.
Right.
Right?
So the statistic that I read is that 70% of business emails are opened within 6 seconds.
Whoa!
I couldn't believe it, but I could totally believe it. So when you're in a meeting and you see people on there they think that they're hiding their phone under the table.
They're answering emails.
They're looking, they're checking, they're answering emails. And it's really become a problem. It's gotten to the point where the urgency of emails are treated as if they're text messages, but they're not. So there was some research that was done at the University of British Columbia, which I found really interesting. They had 2 groups of people. One group was told, leave all of your notifications on, check your email as often as you want, and really go to town. The other group was told you can only check email 3 times a day. And when you're not processing your email, you need to turn your email application off and you can have no notifications on. They tested their cortisol levels to see how stressed they were. And then they also measured how long it actually took them to process their email. So at the end of a week, they switched the groups so you have the same people under the same circumstances. And at the end, they found that the group that was told to check email 3 times a day couldn't. On average, they checked it 5 times a day. But even so, it took them 20% less time to process it, and their stress levels were significantly lower.
I believe it.
Yeah.
I believe it. I mean, for me, one of my biggest stresses is staying on top of news. And I have to say to myself, no, you're going to take hours off. I started, like you set yourself up to not fail and to succeed with your meditation with 2 minutes. I'll say, you know what? I'm going to take a break for a couple of hours. I'm not going to check Twitter. And I feel so much better when I don't.
Yes.
And I need some of that in my life because I think people are so busy and our jobs are so demanding. And whether it's a job volunteering at your kid's school or it's a career type of thing where you're getting paid, you want to answer people quickly because that's just how we roll now. And I think maybe setting a standard to say, you know what, I'll get back to you. I'm in a meeting and I'll get back to you in a couple of hours. Is that okay? And that's it. You put it out there and then you chill.
Right. And part of it is managing people's expectations. If you run your own business, if you always respond right away, that becomes your client's expectation of you. But people by nature are reasonable and they want you to do your best work, especially if it's for them. You can't do your best work when you're constantly checking emails and constantly interrupting your train of thought.
Right. True. And also setting expectations for, let's just say clients, for example. If you make yourself available to somebody in the off hours because you want to accommodate them, it's also okay to say, you know what, I've got just a couple of minutes right now. Maybe we can talk at 1 and just sort of set an expectation like that and not, that's hard to do.
Yes, it's hard to do.
But would you recommend that?
Absolutely. I think because email is 24/7 now, and everyone has their smartphones and they're checking constantly and people want to do a good job. So if they're going to check their email and if their boss has sent an email at 9:00 at night, chances are they're going to answer it. And the reason the boss is sending it is not to be rude or expect the person to respond, but it's weighing on their mind. There's something that they want to get off of their shoulders and off of their plate, so they send the email.
Right.
So one really great solution for people who use Outlook, there is a function to schedule your emails. So I tell people, I totally get that you want to get it off of your plate. Write it, schedule it to arrive during business hours. Yeah. Unless it truly is urgent, have it, it's just a very respectful thing to do to have it arrive during business hours.
Right.
For people who use Gmail, there's something called Boomerang. It does the same thing. And I use a service called Mail Butler for my Mac.
Okay, well,
that's great.
That's actually a brilliant idea because without intending to, sending an email late at night could stress out the recipient.
Oh, it definitely does. It definitely does.
Right? Okay. We have another one. Another common theme that people wrote about was too much to do all at the same time. And Nicole from Massachusetts said, I'm a mother of 2 great kids and I juggle several jobs. I feel like I'm constantly multitasking and sometimes it gets stressful. Sometimes.
Right, I was going to say sometimes it's pretty good.
Yeah.
Multitasking is very stressful. So true multitasking is doing 2 things simultaneously. Mm-hmm. But what we normally refer to as multitasking is really switch tasking, where you're going back and forth between tasks. Let's say you're writing an email, you hear the chime of a text, you read the text, you respond to it, and you come back to the email. And we think that we're doing it seamlessly without consequence. But the research shows it can take up to 20 minutes for your brain to refocus on the original task.
I believe that.
So interestingly, right here at Stanford, the pioneer of the research on multitasking was this Professor Clifford Nass, who unfortunately passed away a couple of years ago. But he saw what was going on and he decided to do some research and he had students self-identify. So one group said, I multitask all the time and I'm great at it. And the other group said, I don't multitask because I really just can't seem to get the hang of it. And he tested them. And what he found in the results was that the group that thought that they were better at it, it actually took them longer to complete tasks. They made more mistakes. Their stress levels were higher. They had trouble distinguishing relevancy, and they had some short-term memory issues.
Wow.
Really bad stuff. So he went back and reported the findings, and they said, well, yeah, all of that is true, but if I want to focus on one thing at a time, I can totally do that. He said, great, I'm in research, let's test it. He tested it and they could not. And the reason is they were so trained to have their brain jump all over the place that even when they wanted to only focus on one thing, they had difficulty doing it.
It's tough.
It's tough. And look, I'm realistic. I know that a lot of people are in work situations where they can't help it. But knowing that they're not getting their best work done, when you have something that's really hard to do that requires deep thought, try to schedule it for a time of day where you're less likely to be interrupted or distracted. I mean, that's really the answer. You can't stop the multitasking, but you can make sure that you are fully focused and not interrupted for that deep work.
Okay, this is great. This is phenomenal advice. We have to break, but I want to come back and pick up. Okay, we'll be right back with Sharon Danzger. We're back with Sharon Danzger. And I wonder if there's any final word on multitasking, any advice that you want to give the viewers?
I guess thinking about it, when you talk about trying to do your deepest work at the time when you're less likely to be interrupted and distracted, for most people that's first thing in the morning. But most people first thing in the morning check their email, and you can get really lost in that. And when you do that, you're letting other people dictate what's most important to you. So what I usually suggest to people is you do need to scan your email and make sure that there isn't something more urgent than what you were going to work on. But after you've scanned it, make sure you shut that off and really just focus on one task that's most important for you to get done during that time.
That's brilliant, because you do get lost. And if you're checking your email at 6 o'clock in the morning, nobody's expecting you to act on it for a couple of hours anyway, so why waste that time whipping yourself into a frenzy? I'm going to follow that lead. Sharon, tell me what contaminated time is.
So contaminated time is a concept I read about in a book called Overwhelmed by Bridget Schultz. And the way she describes it is, you know how sometimes, let's say you're sitting here now with me, we're having this great chat, and you feel your phone in your pocket buzzing. And you know it's clients that you're supposed to be meeting with later today, and they're trying to get your attention. And that worry of what's to come later in the day is distracting you in the moment now, so that you're not totally present.
I'm present with you though, babe.
I know you are. But for many people, that contaminates the time that you're in. Or let's say you go to Starbucks every day, every morning for your coffee, you order the same thing from the same barista. But today, she messes up your order. And you get to your desk and you can't wait to have that latte. You open it up and it's green tea.
Yeah.
Like, what the? Anyhow, an hour later, you're still kind of annoyed by it. So when you bring that stress, whether it be something that could potentially be stressful in the future or the stress from something that happened earlier in the day into that moment, it's contaminating the time that you're in, which is kind of the opposite of mindfulness, right? We're being trained that we need to be in the moment, totally present, with whatever it is that we're doing. It helps us do our best work, makes us less distracted. So contaminated time is sort of the opposite of that. And once you know about it, you can catch yourself contaminating the time and stop your brain from getting carried away.
That's such great advice. Sharon, is there a connection between positive attitude and productivity?
So that's probably one of my very favorite topics to talk about. Recently, I've been doing a lot of reading on positive psychology. And do you ever watch TED Talks?
Oh, yeah.
So my absolute hands down favorite TED Talk is Shawn Achor, who used to be a professor at Harvard and did a lot of research there. And he has a TED Talk on positive psychology. And what he found is that how successful somebody is in the workplace is only 25% predicted by their IQ. The other 75% is made up of their level of optimism, their social support system, and whether they view stress as a challenge or a threat. And in his research, he found that people who operate on brain positive are 31% more productive than people who are operating on a brain that is stressed or neutral or negative.
All right, we have another viewer question. It's from Caroline, also in Massachusetts. I get tired in the late afternoon, but need to finish the workday and then go home, deal with my family, the house, etc. What do you suggest for maintaining productivity through a long day?
That's a great question, and I think it's probably something a lot of people can relate to. If I asked you to picture Steve Jobs, what would you picture him wearing?
A black turtleneck and jeans.
Absolutely. And what about Mark Zuckerberg?
Funky shoes and a hoodie.
And a hoodie. And that's the answer I get from everybody. The funky shoes I didn't actually know about. So the question is, these guys could have a wardrobe consultant living in their home telling them what to wear, but they don't. And I think the reason is they don't care. And they don't want to use up their mental capacity making decisions about things that are not important to them. Do you eat the same breakfast every day?
No.
You don't? Interesting. I do, because I don't want to have to think about it. So they say that we make maybe 35,000 decisions a day, which is crazy.
Wow.
But even if it's a fraction of that, we are making decisions all day long. Did you ever wonder why at 3:34 in the afternoon people are looking for chocolate and caffeine?
Because they're just beat down.
They are exhausted. So the question is, so that's great. Now that we know that, what can we do? Well, there's a few things you can do. One is, if you're not a fashionista and that's not important to you, try to find some kind of wardrobe that's easy that you don't have to overthink. If having a varied breakfast isn't that important to you. If you're going on vacation, let's say every year you go to a warm place for vacation during Christmas break. Create a checklist. Checklists are a great way to reduce decision fatigue. You can use it for the supermarket. Most people get 90% of the stuff is the same every time they go to the supermarket. So the more you can systematize things, the more it frees up your brain for the higher level thinking that you really want to be doing. The other answer to her question is that we sometimes think that we can work for really long stretches of time and be completely focused. But the research shows that 90 minutes is max. And for many people, it's less. One study said that the optimal ratio is 52 minutes of work and a 17-minute rest. The Pomodoro method that a lot of people use is 25 minutes on and 5 minutes off. And when you do that and you consistently give your brain a break, you are able to last much longer and you're not quite as fatigued when it comes to the end of the day. So you have a little more oomph left for your family and to do something in the evening.
That's excellent advice, because I tend to power through things. And have a high expectation, like I've got to get this done.
Right.
And then with so many things that need to be done, I've tried to just focus on one thing at a time.
That's great.
And I make appointments with myself. My iCalendar is filled with things that I need to do, and then that way I don't forget, and so I don't stress about that. It's new.
But that's great. I mean, that actually is a concept called time blocking, where you schedule in your calendar to address certain tasks and things that you want to do. And it protects your time. For those who work in an office where people can see if they're busy or not, it shows them as busy.
Yeah.
And you get much more done. So that's actually a really great practice.
Good. Look at me. Okay, your book, Super Productive. Where can people buy it?
Right on Amazon. It's in the Kindle version and paperback.
All right. Well, you have great advice. I feel calmer just sitting across from you. I'm going to put this stuff into practice. I'm going to start with my morning meditation tomorrow. And I can't thank you enough for being here, Sharon.
It was my absolute pleasure.
Yeah, thanks very much.